Today we got a quick video. Let's go ahead and talk about the pros and cons of going with a Samsung mid-range phone. We got the A35 here versus an old flagship. So we got the S21 Ultra, S22 Plus. So I've recently trying to be getting more mid-range phones on the channel here. We had the A55 earlier this year, which they actually didn't sell in the United States. You had to buy the international version. But the A35 was. So I want to talk about the pros and cons because I get a lot of questions about, should I go with the old Samsung flagship or the mid-range phones? What are the pros and cons? So there are pros and cons depending on, what you're looking for here. So let's go ahead and dive into it. The biggest thing here is actually performance. So with these old Samsung flagships, I think the performance is actually a lot better, and it's because we have Snapdragon processors on here. Samsung is using their Exynos processors, which is not that bad, but these are, I guess, like the lower tier processors. So if you are into gaming and stuff like that, we'll just launch PUBG here. For example, you can see you can play at 90 frames on the S21 Ultra, and this is why a lot of people get old flagships. They really like the cheap gaming experience, right? Because you can get this phone for much cheaper, and you can game competitively. If you're not a competitive gamer, it's not really going to matter. The A35 here, for example, does just fine. It can play smooth, extreme, and it does a good job at 60 frames here. So it's not bad, but it definitely is going to be more noticeable playing at 90 frames. So that's something that you should definitely take into consideration. And overall, I think the speed of the phone is just overall smoother. The one thing I noticed the most is not necessarily with app launching, it's really with these animations here. The animations are pretty much way more consistent on an old flagship versus a mid-range phone here. And Samsung is using these Exynos processors pretty much. So the Exynos processors, I have no clue how they're gonna do in the long term, but I do know these Snapdragon processors pretty much have remained smooth throughout the years. Even my Note 10 Plus is still very smooth, even with animations and launching apps and stuff. So we'll just have to see. But even right now, the overall app launching experience and animations are just better on the old flagships. Let's talk about software. So there's a pro and con here with software. So for example, the A35 here, you can get this phone brand new, right? $250, and that's also another pro with the mid-range phones. You can get them brand new instead of in the used refurbished marketplace. But the software on here, so this launched with Android 14. It will get up to Android 18 because it has a 4-year pledge and it'll get security patches. So for example, the S21 Ultra here, this phone, it has its last majorOS update with Android 15. So it won't get any more majorOS updates after that, but it will get security patches after that. So a phone like the S22 Plus, this phone will get a few more updates and then it'll be done for majorOS updates. So you do have a longer lifespan as far as software updates. So that is one pro of the mid-range phones here. So I'm not like a big update person, honestly. Like One UI 7 is not going to be that much different from One UI 6.1 or whatever, but a lot of people, if you're into that, because they are doing some redesign with the icons and the control thing, but it's not like a big deal. I wouldn't it's just, it comes down to personal preference, what you like, right? Now, one benefit to getting an old flagship is that you get to experience the Galaxy AI features, which you don't get on the A55, I believe, and you don't get it on the A35. You can experience all of the Galaxy AI features. I believe this only has circle to search. Yeah, it only has circle to search, and I think that's pretty much it. But you get pretty much all the essential features on something like an S22, but it's not available on the S21 series. So just do note that you have to have an S22 series phone. But that's very cool to get these cool features, because AI is going to be very big. Well, it is already big, but it's going to be, they're going to keep pushing it, all these AI features. So that's really nice that the old flagships do get it. Now, one hardware concern that's kind of like it's not really a con, but to get SD card support, because these phones, they launch with like the A35, it has SD card support. You can get a Galaxy S20 FE, or you can get a S20 FE. You have to go a little bit older for the SD card support, because Samsung took it out after the S21, after the S20 series. So anything that's S21 and up is not going to have SD card support. So you will have to get, you know, something a little bit older, which still is perfectly fine. But just do note that that is, I guess, it could be a con depending on how old you want to go for an old flagship. So one of the biggest things that you guys will notice here that adds to the experience is the bezels on the A55 and A35 are really chunky, which again, this is a thing that it really depends on you. Some people could care less, but you can see the overall experience just feels more luxury on something like an S22 Plus, and not to mention the overall screen specs are a little bit better here, having HDR10 Plus and then also having a higher max brightness. But the screen on the A35, A55 is perfectly fine. It just has those thick bezels that a lot of people find displeasing to the eye, right? But it's a very minor thing, but I just, you know, wanted to mention that you do have a more, it adds to the kind of more luxury experience on these older flagships. Also might be minor, but features like Samsung desktop support are not supported on these mid-range phones. I really like Samsung desktop support. It's very cool to put on your TV, or if you want an external monitor. I've seen people even rig it up to like have like a little gaming setup with emulators and cloud gaming. So it's pretty cool to have Samsung desktop support. But again, it's a power user feature that, you know, you may or may not need, right? Also, one thing to know about these mid-range phones is that they use the optical fingerprint scanner. Again, it's something that's very minor, but you can kind of tell the difference immediately. It's just a little bit slower on the mid-range phones. But again, very minor thing. Touch on cameras. I want to talk about battery life. So that's the biggest concern with batteries. So these phones, like I said, they're new. They pretty much have like these big batteries, 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, stuff like that. The battery life is very good on these mid-range phones. So with the old flagship, since we are going to have battery degrade over time, what you can do is charge your phone to 80%. Samsung has it battery protection baked into here where you can charge it to 80%. This will extend your battery health a lot. So this is what I do for my old flagships. Turn this on and your battery health will be good for years and years, right? So you don't have to worry about that. Now, for me, like people say, oh, well, what if I buy it? The battery is not that great. Battery health, typically you can just take it to a phone shop and get it swapped out. But again, this is inconvenient. A lot of people don't want to do that, right? So this is where another pro for mid-range phones comes in. You don't have to swap out the battery and stuff like that. Now, I've never had that issue before. Like, even if I do need to swap out a battery, I'll just take it to a phone shop. It's pretty cheap. But yeah, that's something that it's inconvenient. People don't want to do it, right? Totally understand that. So that's definitely a pro for a mid-range phone. Let's touch on the photos, right? The photos on the old flagships I still think are better, but the mid-range phones have gotten really good. Like the A55, it takes really good stills. My only issue with it is they don't put telephoto lenses on there, you know, for obvious reasons, but the zoom photography is not going to be that great. I noticed, like, even with the A35, like, even the 2x zoom on here just kind of, like, messes up the color and stuff like that. Your zoom is not going to be all that great. As for, like, a S22 Plus, you can get pretty good zoom shots. I would say pretty decent at 10x. But if you get something like an S21 Ultra, the zoom photography is crazy good. 10x, 30x, you're getting amazing shots at, you know, 10x, 30x. So that's a pretty interesting thing. So the zoom photography would only matter if you go out to like sporting events, concerts, or, you know, you find yourself in situations where you would need to actually use the zoom photography. So it really depends, but I do think the overall specs and the camera quality is still better on an old flagship. But I would say that the mid-range phones are very good at just taking, you know, basic stills. It's really not that bad at all. It's nowhere near as bad as I thought it was. So what do you guys think? Would you go with a mid-range phone here in 2024, or are you sticking with an old flagship? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.